copy of a copy of a copy of a copy copy. Deja vu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV and movies that were later rebooted. For season 1, we're discussing The Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 33, titled Mr. Bevis. And Mr. Bevis was originally aired on June 3rd, 1960. It was directed by William Asher, written by Rod Serling, and starring Rod Serling, Orson Bean, and Henry Jones.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
suddenly up ahead.
Just you're moving into another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
So here's Rod Serling's opening voiceover from Mr. Bevis. In the parlance of the 20th century, this is an oddball. His name is James B.W. Bevis, and his tastes lean toward stuffed animals, zither music, professional football, Charles Dickens, moose heads, carnivals, dogs, children, and young ladies. Mr. Bevis is accident-prone, a little vague, a little discombobulated, with a life that possesses all the security of a floating crap game. But this can be said of our Mr. Bevis. Without him, without his warmth, without his kindness, the world would be a considerably poorer place, albeit perhaps a little saner. Then there's a little dialogue scene. Should it not be obvious by now, James B.W. Bevis is a fixture in his own private, optimistic, hopeful little world, a world which has long ceased being surprised by him. James B.W. Bevis, on whom Dame Fortune will shortly turn her back, but not before she gives him a paste in the mouth. Mr. James B.W. Bevis, just one block away from the Twilight Zone. Ooh, that was a long one.
Yes, that opening narration was about a block long. The description from IMDb, the summary from IMDb, is after losing his job, his car, and his apartment on the same day, an eccentric loser gets a new life from his guardian angel. But, Mark, there is a price. There is a price to keeping it. There's always a monkey's paw.
I was going to say there've been a few bad IMDb descriptions of late. I will say that one actually is a pretty decent summary of the episode.
Right.
Yeah. So, look, Mike, I know we have not liked several of the most recent episodes, and I think this is probably going to fall in the same boat.
Oh yeah.
I actually. Like obviously Google and Amazon and everybody else are listening. And so I get all this Twilight Zone stuff showing up in my feed. And one that showed up last night for me was like top 10 worst Twilight Zone episodes ever. And I was like, oh, let me look through that. I'm just curious. I mean, lots of people make these lists. That happened to show up. And I'm like, I'm curious to see which ones that we have watched and didn't like might show up on there. And the very first one was Mr. Bevis. Like, this does not bode well.
Wait, let me guess some of them. Do you have the list in front of you?
I don't have the list in front. Most of them were from later seasons.
Oh, okay.
It had a couple from this season. It did not have the fever, so I immediately disqualified the list.
You probably did. It have a stop at Willoughby? It certainly didn't, right?
It did not. No.
Of course, it didn't.
I'm trying to think. I think it had one or two others from this first season that we didn't particularly like, but that weren't terrible. It had one other that we haven't seen yet.
Is it the Mighty Casey?
There's only 3 episodes left. It was the Mighty Casey.
Yeah,
I didn't read anything about it
too.
because I knew we still had it, but I'm like, well, this does not bode well that in the top 10, although I think it went, I saw things on the list through like season 5, I think. So it's, somebody who had apparently at least watched a lot of these, and the fact that 2 of the last 4 episodes this season were on there is not a good sign.
Oh,
anyway.
No.
Mike, I know that we actually have some listener feedback to talk about, and given that we don't want to spend a lot of time on this episode, why don't we start with that, because that will be more interesting than Mr. Bevis.
Yeah, so on Twitter, Tinker to Evers to Chance had tweeted at us that Jack Klugman, who played in A Passage for Trumpet, I forget the main character's name now, but was the guy in A Passage for Trumpet.
Was it something Crown?
Yes. James Crown, yes, Crown. We could look it up,
whatever.
But who cares? But anyhow, and we did say when
Not
we
us,
talked,
we don't care.
when we talked about,
I'm actually looking up my notes. It's Joey Crown.
When we looked up that episode, Jack Klugman and Orson, Meredith Burgess, Burgess Meredith. That was
We're off
confusing.
to a fantastic
Jack
start. this
Klugman
week.
and Burgess Meredith were the two most prolific. Let's say they came back a bunch of times in a bunch of different episodes of the Twilight Zone as main characters, and
as different main characters.
different
since
main
it's an
characters.
anthology.
Yes, right. So Tinker to Evers to Chance said that Jack Klugman is in one of his favorite Twilight Zone episodes, which is A Game of Pool, which is not in this season. So we might make a leap to take a look at that one, even if we don't do an episode about it. But we should probably check that episode out if it's a good. And I think I vaguely recall this one because I want to. It's probably like in the second season, so I do think I've seen this one because I recognize Jack Klugman from Odd Couple, as I mentioned last week, and certainly would have recognized him again if I saw that episode. So I did want to check that out.
Can I quick mention but while you were on that tweet, I saw that as well. And the Tinker to Evers Chance, as Mike knows, and you may have picked up when he's talked about Cub stuff on this podcast, I do not follow baseball at all. I would have had no connection to that or any idea what that was, except just like this past week, the same week that showed up on our Twitter, 538, which I read religiously, is doing this series called The Hall of Pretty Damn Good Players, of people who didn't make the Hall of Fame, but like have a case where they should have in different sports. And the Tinker to Evers to Chance, like famous double play triangle or whatever, showed up as a reference point for somebody else they were talking about as like the only comparison. So I saw them like, oh wow, that's just fortuitous that the week that showed up in Twitter happened to be. Otherwise, I would not have gotten that reference.
And the
so it is a baseball reference for those who don't know.
It's a Cubs reference specifically,
which would have been me.
Frank Chance had been the last Cub manager to win a World Series until Joe Madden, who the Cubs unceremoniously dumped after a couple seasons after he won the World Series with a futile franchise, which is why I'm no longer a Cubs fan.
He ruined their track record of not winning World Series.
Yeah, good point. Good point. And
you can't have that kind of just like not being part of the business plan of the organization.
Yeah, they'd much rather have a folksy idiot in charge, which is who they have if baseball ever comes back. Anyhow, this is not a baseball podcast. Then I don't know if you've gotten a chance to take a look at this, Mark, but put this on your to-watch list. There's a pretty quick, good series called Hollywood on Netflix. It's about the kind of golden age of Hollywood and these guys that are trying to make it big. And it was interesting. Rock Hudson is a minor character in the show. It was good. It's worth a watch on Netflix. But at I tweeted this at you or at Deja Reviewed that they do mention Ed Wynn, who played in One for the Angels, played our lovable pitchman. Yeah, Lou Bookman.
We loved Ed Wynn.
Yeah. So, and Edwin it was funny too. I believe, if I'm recalling this correctly, that they mentioned that remember we talked about how he was going to play Santa and Miracle on 34th Street in that version of Miracle on 34th Street. This is a long time ago. This is like the second episode of the series. So they mentioned that Miracle on 34th Street and Edwin being in it in Hollywood, which I thought was kind of interesting. I was like, that would have just blown over me. I would have never even noticed that if we hadn't done this series.
Well, so this is useful for us, if for no one else.
Exactly. And then, so Glenn on Facebook had sent a message to us saying that, because he knows, especially you, Mark. Oh, so I don't know why I watch this, but especially you are obsessed with the use of mirrors in Twilight Zone. And he mentioned a specific episode of Longmire where there is a interesting or like an abundance of use of mirrors. And so I have never seen an episode of Longmire in my entire life. Of course, now I have seen one. So I did watch this episode. It was the penultimate episode of season 2 of Longmire. So I kind of had no idea. So
you jumped in almost all the way through season 2 to watch one episode to see the use of mirrors.
That's correct. And now, thank you for this, Glenn, because I kind of want to watch Longmire now because it seemed pretty good. Although, who's the actor from RoboCop, the main guy?
Peter Weller.
He's a terrible actor.
Is he in it?
Yes, he's in Longmire. Okay. I've never liked him as an actor. I think he's a terrible actor. And
he's a fantastic RoboCop.
Okay.
Like that's the
Well,
part he was made to play.
He's playing a robot, though, essentially. So an emotionless robot. So he is not that makes him not a good actor, in my opinion.
Well, we assume he actually is human, not a robot. So the
Okay.
fact that he could play a robot is good acting, even if it's a limited range.
His acting has never proved that he is not a robot, because he is terrible, and he is terrible in this episode. Although I did not know what was going on. But like Katie
Do you know
Sackhoff
what
is
Peter
in it?
Weller does aside from acting?
No.
He's like an art history professor.
Oh, is he? That
Like,
he's
I
that
might
level
have the
of,
detail wrong, but he's like he is well educated and teaches like collegiate level something, and I want to say it's art history.
well, he should stick to his day job, because I could see him as a professor. I cannot see him as anything else, except I guess
I will
RoboCop.
stand by. He's a good RoboCop.
Okay, and I will also make an argument that in hindsight, RoboCop is not a very good movie. I know we all loved the ultra violence in the 80s, but RoboCop kind of sucks. Fight me.
Anyway, yeah, the thing I remember from RoboCop is then the first one I haven't watched in a while. I have no idea how well it holds up. Probably not very well, would be my guess. Although it does have the dad from that 70s show as Clarence Boddicker, like the lead villain, which was fantastic. And that Ed 209 is still like one of the coolest, like the visual effects on it were not ready for prime time, but is like the coolest design of like a killer robot sort of thing. It just like looks so menacing. The thing with the giant cannon arms. Anyway, what I was gonna say with Peter Weller and RoboCop is, so that movie did well. They were going to make sequels. The sequels, by the way, are terrible. Regardless of what we think about whether RoboCop holds up, the sequels were bad when they came out and have remained bad. But for RoboCop 2, part of his agreement to sign on was they had to find a way to cut the weight of the suit by like 50 or 60%, because the original suit he's wearing, I'll get the number wrong, but it's like 150 pounds or something like that. Like it's an insane amount of weight. He's just like trying to move around it.
And he's
like,
not a
I'm
big guy.
not doing that for, 15 hours a day again. So they found a way to make the suit lighter for the second movie.
Anyhow, so I did watch this episode of Longmire. Again, this is making me want to watch Longmire. I'll be super spoiled by the time I get to this episode. But Glenn was 100% right. There is a ton of use of mirrors in this episode. And so I kind of just took some notes on some of the other stuff. The kind of thematic thing I think I noticed with that episode, if you guys are wanting to jump into the middle, into episode 12, I think, of season 2 of Longmire, there's it seemed they were using it most effectively to kind of convey like an authority, because in case you don't know, it's a Wyoming sheriff that I guess this guy, his wife died and he's trying to pick up the pieces of his life is the description. But he's a Wyoming sheriff, and there was a lot of shots. Not only did they use straight up mirrors, but there were also like reflective surfaces, a lot of like off the chrome of like a bumper when a car had been pulled over. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of like, hey, look, the camera's not in this shot, which was kind of interesting.
Like where they're like shooting into the reflection and you're seeing the action reflected instead of the...
Exactly. Although there wasn't, I mean, especially with the chrome of the bumper, it wasn't that easy to see what was happening in the reflected part, but it was interesting. And then there was a lot of, especially at the end, it felt like they were trying to convey a sense of authority with the reflections in the mirrors, because there were probably 3 cars that got pulled over during the episode. Actually, there was way more than that, but the ones that were important, there was like, you know how in the side view mirrors of your cars, or a lot of them, there's the side view mirror and then the smaller mirror that gives you more of a fishbowl view of the outside.
Yes.
There was a really cool shot where the officer was walking up and just his badge was in like the fish bowl part of it, which was really amplified. Then there was a really cool shot at the end where there's sort of a showdown. I don't want to give any spoilers in case you're in the middle of Longmire. And I wouldn't even know what the spoiler was because I didn't know what was really happening. But there was a cool shot at the end where there was the showdown between the sheriff and this guy, and the sheriff comes and confronts him in his motel room, and you're seeing the back of the sheriff's head, or he's wearing a cowboy hat because he's a Oklahoma sheriff, or Wyoming sheriff, I should say. And he had kind of he was sitting down and the guy was standing. So ordinarily you would have this sort of like not, the other guy had the advantage, sort of the menacing advantage, but the sheriff kind of had it just because of the way that it was shot, like his reflection in the hat in the back. It was kind of neat. But I thought the coolest thing that they did was there was a shot that Katie Sackhoff is also in this, which is funny because we were thinking of Battlestar Galactica when she's in the reboot, and for Deja
I'm gonna have a hard time seeing her as anything other than Starbuck. It's
yeah,
like
totally.
so ingrained. Yeah,
but I really like Katie Sackhoff a lot. So I think it was her that was looking out this window at the sheriff's office, I believe, and you could sort of see the reflection of the outside. They're looking into this window from the outside at her, and they changed the angle a little bit on the camera, so the reflection became because she was getting stalked essentially, and they suddenly changed the camera angle just a little bit, so the reflection was stronger, so you had a better angle on the reflection. It was hitting the camera more, and it almost like made her disappear a little bit more into just the reflection, which I thought was a really cool idea because she was feeling menaced by this outside world. I thought it was a really neat shot. And then there was some definitely a ton of uses of it, even not with a shot. There was a guy, they approached this scientist in a lab, and as they approach him, he doesn't even need to turn and look because there's a mirror on the wall in front of him, and you can see that he's looking up there, even though you don't see the shot. You see that he's looking up in the mirror to see them coming. I'm not surprised that Glenn noticed that there was a ton of mirror use in this episode, because there was all reflections probably every couple of minutes in this episode that they were being utilized to some extent. Also, just some stuff like Katie Sackhoff's character goes to answer the door at one point, and her reflection is sort of juxtaposed over this woman that's coming to visit. There was a ton of use of reflection, so I'm glad I probably will start watching Longmire now.
Well, Glenn, thanks for that tip. And for everyone out there listening, if you want to shoot a tweet at us or send us an email or leave a voicemail on the website, as you can tell, those get read, listened to, and sometimes discussed on the podcast. And Glenn, thanks for that. And
thanks for introducing me to something else really cool because I had seen Longmire pop up a bunch of times and just never really gave it a second thought. And you were just saying the other day, the problem is you have so much time and there's just nothing to watch. And so now you finally have something. Well, while we're on mirrors, I will say this, to bring it back to Mr. Bevis, unfortunately, just briefly, this was actually one of the better, more interesting uses of mirrors in a Twilight Zone we've seen, because he's at the bar, and there's a mirror behind the bartender, as we've seen in several Twilight Zones. And he looks, he's sitting at the bar. He looks up in the mirror and sees somebody behind him in a booth waving at him, and turns around and the guy's not there. And he looks back in the mirror and he is. And that's kind of how his guardian angel first appears. And then throughout the episode, they play with some different ways in terms of how he appears or disappears. But he's kind of introduced through this mirror. And I thought it was a nice device, like a little sort of playful thing. That he could only see him at first when he's looking in the mirror, and then he has to go and sit down at the booth with nobody, as far as we can tell, before the guardian angel will appear. So and then he's walking. I thought that was a clever little use. Yeah, and then he's walking out of the bar with his arm around him, and there's no one there. The bartender just sees him as walking out with his arm held up. Which kind of answered the question we had with A Passage for Trumpet, when Joey Crown was pouring himself some drinks, and we're but he was invisible like a ghost or whatever. And we're why isn't the bartender noticing this? And we were wondering what it actually looked like to the bartender, if nothing was happening, or if the bottle of whiskey was floating up in the air and pouring itself, or what. And in this one, it was funny because very much Bevis was interacting with the person. Other people see him talking to him. They see him with his arm around him, except they can't see the other person. So it led to some, I would say nice visual gags, which would imply they are funnier or more interesting than they are. But it had the rest of the episode worked, those would have been nice touches on it. So before we get too far into the episode, can we discuss the new opening?
Yes.
What was that?
Well, and why do it with 4 episodes left in the first season? So they changed the opening to the Twilight Zone, which you may not have noticed if you've been watching this on Netflix and you just skip the intro, or you're watching a bunch in a row and it just jumps you in past. But they changed the opening. It's shorter and different visuals and a little bit different voiceover from Serling. And I was just like, "What? You're at the end of the first season. Just wait till next season." I don't know why they changed it here. That was
was a way cheesier title card that like the Twilight Zone comes in and gets underlined. It was really weird. It didn't have the Twilight Zone text that you would have expected from the first 32
and that I think
episodes.
they go back to in later episodes.
Yeah,
like I
I
wonder
hope
if this
so.
is just an anomaly, and maybe we're not going to watch through multiple seasons, but I wonder. I know I've seen future seasons in the opening where it is back to like the original Twilight Zone text, the way you expect it to be written a little weirdly, and so I don't know. That was weird. I just used weird like 100 times. So I have a lot to, well, I don't even want to say I have a lot. There's very little to talk about with this episode because this is essentially the same episode we saw last week. Again, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
But I did, before we get into the criticisms of this, which will be many, Mike, I wanted to note something, and I think maybe like toot our own horn or pat ourselves on the back for a little bit with this. I as a film professor, I read and hear a lot of film criticism and film reviews and stuff. And one of the things that really bugs me is there's actually very little like in the way of film reviews out there. There are a lot of story reviews. There are very few things that actually treat movies as movies and talk about the images and the sounds and stuff like that. And I definitely think the stories and the themes are the crucial, most important part. I mean, when I talk to my students, like that's the foundation everything else is built on. If you don't have a good script, if you don't have a good story, it's very hard to turn that into a good movie. But there are all these other steps beyond this, and it's interesting how many, like if you just, there's some movie, well, there's not movies coming out right now, but back when the movie theaters were open, you go look at the reviews or go to Rotten Tomatoes, and if you read through those, many of them you wouldn't even know it was a movie. They could have written the same review on a book or just on the script because they don't talk about the visual, they talk about the sound. And one of the things at least I like, and I am proud of us for doing, is with all these episodes, we spend a lot of time on the stories and themes, but we do talk about the production and the visuals and sound and how they're made and the mirrors and stuff like that. And so I just wanted to give us a shout out because I came across some other things in the past couple of weeks when I was finishing up this paper on Joker and I was reading some of the Joker reviews. I'm like, none of these, I can even tell if they saw the movie. For all I know, they just read the script because there's nothing about how it sounds, nothing about how it looks, other than, some, in that case, some of them talked about Joaquin Phoenix's performance, which was certainly worth talking about. But it was just interesting to me, and I wanted to give ourselves a pat on the back. And in that category, I would actually say one of the few things I liked about this episode, I don't think it was shot well, so that's not one of the things I liked. But I think the production design in this I thought was very cool. They have a lot of different locations. We're outside in a couple different places, inside in a couple different places. We're in an office, we're in a bar, we're in his house. And the production design, I thought for this, it was expansive because we're in all these different spaces. There were also a lot of extras and stuff for a Twilight Zone. This felt like a big production. And the production design told us a lot. Like, the very first cut in the episode starts outside watching some kids playing on the street, and which I should note was a mixed race group of kids all playing together, which I thought was a nice little touch and something in referencing to other things we talked about in Twilight Zone. They didn't have to do. I'm sure it would have been perfectly easy to just get, a bunch of white kids in there, but they intentionally went with a mixed group and then didn't comment on it. It was just like, yeah, these kids are all playing together. That's fine, which I dug. But as soon as we get inside his apartment, before the voiceover comes in, before we see our protagonist, like, you learn a lot about him just from looking around that apartment. Like, oh my God, this is a disaster with all this stuff that doesn't match, that is all over the place, all sorts of, clashing things and ideas and interests, which turns out to exactly reflect his character. Same thing when we go to his office. The first shot inside the office where all these people are typing away, which desk is his because all of them have these clean desks with like their typewriter and their phone. And he has all this weird paraphernalia and a stuffed squirrel and other stuff. Like, I liked the use of the design to tell us something about him. And even the changing clothes that in his quote unquote normal version of his life, he's wearing this super hideous like plaid jacket and bow tie, and none of it matches with the other pieces. And then when his guardian angel like gives him the sort of, quote unquote better life, where he is doing well at his job and making money and all this stuff. And he has just this plain suit. Like the visual contrast was striking. So I wanted to give a shout out for the production design on this, because that I did think was well done in a very expansive episode where there was a lot of design to do, both in terms of number of sets and in terms of just doing his apartment would have taken a huge amount of work, because there's so much stuff crammed in there. So I want to mention that.
Well, I don't know if this is included in this, but I will give a shout out to the effects. I mean, like there were a couple, at least I don't think they were particularly well executed, but there were a lot of effects in it. There was a shot or an effect where his guardian angel walks through a door and he crashes into the door, which was, in 2020, it didn't look great, but I'm sure that was mind blowing in 1960. And
it was funny. It was a well set up shot in that case, because it's a clear glass door. Like there's no indication that it's closed or anything at the start. And the guardian angel walks through it and steps to the side, clearly green screen, as as you said, there's a pretty clear outline around him that wouldn't fly today, but in the time, the technology they had. Okay. And he's coming from the background and Bevis walks right into the door. And I thought that was clever. And that was a good, well set up little gag.
Then they ruined the gag, though, by having the guardian angel facially react to him crashing into it. And he's looking nowhere near Bevis. And he's just kind of like rolling his eyes and shaking his head and kind of trying not to laugh. And it was very jarring because his facial expressions did not match up with what was actually happening, which I thought was super weird.
Yeah, and and they had the other effect where they're sitting in the booth in the bar, and the sort of painting on the wall behind them turns into showing almost like a TV screen, and it's showing these still images of other people in Bevis's family history that this guardian angel had also helped. And again, not super well executed to the standards of now. I have no idea, if it was good with the technology they had at the time or not, but a sort of clever idea of how to use the technique.
I thought that was also a little funny that they just had Orson Bean dressed up in as his ancestors in these different like outfits. That was kind of a funny moment.
That's sort of like a classic movie thing. I'm thinking of like Back to the Future as a very similar example, where every generation, the people look exactly the same and are played by the same person. And I'm like, I don't think that's really how ancestry works. Like I look at my parents and I can see a resemblance, and I look at their parents and I can see a little less resemblance to me, but maybe something. Like you get back a few generations, like it'd be really bizarre if the people still actually looked exactly the same.
Yeah, agreed. So this is another episode.
I think that's everything good I had to say about this.
Okay, let's take a break and we'll come right back after the break then. Hey folks, Michael from Deja Reviewed here. I did want to give a quick plug to one of my other podcasts, The Bureau Boys. We just wrapped our first season and we're about to start recording season 2. It's a really silly, fun, improvised, untrue crime podcast. We have a lot of fun with it. There's a ton of audience interaction. So I hope you check it out at thebureauboys.com. Okay, we're back. We're still discussing Mr. Bevis. And we did, by the way, acknowledge last week that this has nothing to do with Beavis and Butthead. And although maybe Bevis is an ancestor.
Watching an episode of Beavis and Butthead would have been more interesting.
For sure. So we've talked in the last few episodes, Mark, about this sort of thematic kind of nostalgic Rod Serling about appreciating your life and kind of being yourself. And the whole moral of this one, or the whole theme of this one, is Mr. Bevis realizing that, I could have the job and the car and my apartment back and all that stuff would be great if I would just be this super boring new version of Mr. Bevis and not wear the flamboyant jacket and not play with the kids. Won't play with him anymore because he's wearing a suit. Apparently he shows up on time. Oh, speaking of showing up on time, when you were talking about The Office earlier, I got a very 1984 vibe from the layout of The Office, because you're just sort of sitting outside, the camera's just outside the boss's door, looking down this row of just people, just drones typing on typewriters. I didn't know what the business was, but it was very 1984, very conformist feeling, that office space. But this
it had a little bit of the feel of not the very beginning, but early in Saving Private Ryan, after the sort of D-Day invasion, when they're back and there's all the women like in this giant office typing out the letters of to your son's been killed and blah, blah, blah. And it had that same kind of feel, like all these people are just typing. There's another nice production bit with the use of the sound there where they're either like all typing and it's like clack, 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 like super busy, or they all stop exactly at the same time and like it's totally silent.
I thought you were going to bring up Joe versus the volcano, not Saving
I was
Private
not
Ryan.
going to bring up Joe versus the volcano. Okay. That also stars Tom Hanks though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And Meg Ryan.
You forget how many movies they have been in together. It's a lot. I was going to say, you mentioned he showed up on time. I actually thought it was weird because he shows up at exactly the same time in both cases. And he shows up at 8:58. So apparently their work was supposed to start at 8, I'm guessing, because if it's supposed to start at 9, he's early. And in the earlier version of him, when he's he's his normal self, the boss is like, well, you inform Mr. Bevis when he deigns to show up that I need to see him, like he's running late. But then he shows up at exactly the same time when he's like the good Bevis, and the manager comes out and like gives him a promotion. It was weird. A
promotion of $10 a week, or a raise of $10 a week, I should say.
Okay, so I looked this up because I'm like, that doesn't sound like very much. But we also have to remember this is set in the 1920s.
Oh, I didn't realize. I didn't pick that up.
So the clue is
the Bedecker
when
car?
they talk about the cars, right? Because his car is a 24.
You're right.
And the guy says he's talking to a cop about it, and the cop says he's waiting for the 27s to come out. Which, man, his car deteriorated fast. If it's like 1927 and his was a 24, it's at most like 4 years old. And I thought it was going to be, it's my 24. And the guy's like, well, I'm waiting for the new 52s to come out. Like it's been around for 25 years. Anyway, so it's 1927. I looked it up. Average full-time earnings in 1927. We also have to remember this is like close to Depression era. Is it? I should know this. Is 1927? Are we already in the Depression?
I think just before, right?
Because it's 29 is the crash.
I think 29.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not quite in the Depression. Anyway, so people who were working full time, average weekly earnings were $36.85.
Oh, okay. So this could be a big raise.
Now we don't know if he was making more or less than that, but like order of magnitude, if he was like an average worker, that's like a 25 to 30% raise. Like that would be the equivalent of if you were making $40,000 a year now, suddenly you're making 50, 51.
Yeah,
so that was a nice raise.
Yeah. Along the lines of your car deteriorating that quickly, if anyone's watched Adam Ruins Everything, which is, I think, on True TV, it's
also a podcast too.
So Factually, I think, is the name of the podcast, right? Because that's what I was just about to bring up. So yeah, it's either Factually or Adam. I think it's called Factually is actually the podcast. I could probably look at it on my phone. But anyhow, Adam Conover is a stand-up comedian. The show is, I believe, also on Netflix. The show is excellent. Adam Ruins Everything. Mm-hmm. I think it's very important, actually, for people to watch certain episodes of that show. He's obviously been doing a lot with the pandemic right now and having a lot of experts. He was doing a lot about racial relations when the most recent horrific crime happened against a person of color. But I was just listening to an early episode where they talked about how we turned into such a car-dependent society. And Henry Ford, the original Model T, was supposed to be like, you buy this car and this is your car for life. Like this car is built to last. It's supposed to just be the car. You just buy the car once and then that's your car and you just have the car. And then, of course, this is a very educational podcast, and I, of course, forget who actually brought in the idea that not planned obsolescence, which I know is a thing that everyone thinks that people are doing now, and is for good reason that they think that. But the idea that, hey, we got to get people to start turning these cars over. So their first thing was like, well, we can't innovate the car that much from year to year. Let's do different colors. And it's a cheap investment for them. And they just would do different colors of car and would start convincing people that these cars were sort of disposable assets. And of course, now we're in a society where it's like, 3-year lease and turn it over in 3 years. And you're not even going to have 100,000 miles on the car at that point, most likely. So it's interesting for sure. Listen to Factually, the podcast, and watch Adam Ruins Everything. Even if you don't watch it from top to tail or start to finish, look at the topics that he addresses, like there's some very important ones I think that are on there. Frankly, like the internet one is shockingly frustrating, and it will probably annoy everyone when they hear how helpless we are. But I think the pervasive message in a lot of very frustrating government things is get out and vote in your local elections, and eventually that'll percolate up to the top, which I don't even do, and I'm a lawyer. Like, so it's an important message.
Well, and you should. And I think that is an important point. I think we get so focused on the sort of national politics and stuff for good reason. I mean, there are some big things that happen there, but so much, and I think the pandemic has actually done some of the work on this for us, is like really made people aware that like your local and state officials matter. And yes, if there was some actual leadership and intelligent guidance coming from the federal level, that would make a huge difference as well. But look how different states and different localities are responding, and the outcomes of that, like those state and local issues and politicians matter, and they often don't get a lot of attention. I'm curious to see if there's a long-term shift from that, because I think this past 6 months, people have become much more aware of who some of their local leaders are and how they think they responded. I don't know if that'll stick or if that'll be a sort of short-term thing, and then people go back to just paying attention to the national stuff. But you know what, while you're mentioning the car thing, one of the other things about the pandemic that I just heard on, I think it was on the Make Me Smart podcast. I'm listening to so many podcasts at this point. That's all there is to do. That they were talking about, you know, some of these cities have closed off some streets during the shutdown, basically to give people, you know, they didn't need as much driving because people weren't driving to work, and to give people safe areas to go walk or exercise. So in some areas, you know, like not like whole continuous square miles of streets, but like lots and lots of closed streets. And now some of those cities are looking at like, can we make this permanent? Like, do we need so much driving space? And one stat that was just sort of crazy was in Los Angeles County, which granted is a huge county. It spreads over a lot of space. There's like 16 square miles of just surface parking.
Oh, I'm not surprised. 16
square miles of space that could be used for parks or homes or offices or anything that is just like there to put cars there. I don't know. It's our city, our infrastructure has been so designed around cars. It's not good. I think sort of everyone realizes that, but it's one of these things where you're so far down that rabbit hole. Like, how do you change that? People have made all their decisions about where they're working, where they're living and such based on the sort of single car transit. And it's really hard to get America off of that.
Yeah. So you should listen to this episode, because really the solution is, and so they had this transportation or car expert on there, and they're like, because one of the things, of course, they address is pollution. And so everyone's like, oh, well, the electric car, that'll help with pollution. And the guy, the expert that they had on there, he's like, yeah, but like solving the problem of cars by making another car. He's like, when that happens, we're just going to have more cars. He's like, we need to address like the infrastructure. And I think it was on the series, Adam Ruins Everything. They touched on this topic a little bit, and they talked about how the streetcar just used to be the way to get around. And then basically everything that bad that happens in this country goes back to our government. There were enough people donating to government that they villainized the streetcar, and they made the car the thing that people needed to have and people needed to do. And like with self-driving cars, they were even talking about that sort of being the next thing, the next battleground that's going to be fought. And again, go vote in your local elections and vote green, for God's sake, because that's the next disaster that we're going to run into. But the point the guy was making, he's like, yeah, electric cars, that's all well and good. He's like, but if any solution that we have that involves cars, if we make them more efficient, we make them safer, he's like, that's just going to add more cars to the road. Even if they're less polluting, there's going to be more of them. And the problem is just going to cycle and cycle and cycle. And talking about all the parking in LA, it always blows my mind. There's this one holdout. Well, there's a couple holdouts in the Loop in Chicago, where you could build a 30-story parking garage and fill it every single day with, $50 a car. And there's like a single level parking lot, just a surface level parking lot that specifically that I'm thinking of. Obviously there's multiple ones of them. I'm like, the owner of that property, how in the world did they not just build this mega structure parking lot on this space? So the value lost in not building this structure that you can park, 30 times the number of cars is lost on me. But you're right. We're so ingrained in the car culture. All the money that we would spend on building a more efficient car, a better car, would be better spent building better infrastructure, better transportation options for our government or for our cities and towns, and giving people options to get in there. The same reason, like everyone talks about the police, like the big news that are the police right now, and how much billions of dollars are in their budgets. Speaking of LA, although they at least did take a step to sort of cut their funding, there's another episode I was listening to. They're like, why are police the ones that are dealing with homeless people? Why can't we have social workers and mental health care professionals who are more equipped and have more education than these police officers? Why are we sending an armed person to deal with those things? Why don't we throw money at solutions to the problems instead of giving the police an ATV and SWAT equipment and spending all this I mean, these are small armies that our police officers are now, and it's ridiculous. Instead of addressing the problem, we have a way of just throwing money at a Band-Aid solution. And I don't know why we're talking about this, because this episode's so boring.
Yeah, well, I think that's if you're looking for common ground, I think one of the places where I've seen and boy, we know it's hard to find common ground between opposing sides these days, but where I've seen op-eds and editorials by police officers is on that specific issue. Like, yes, part of the problem is basically every problem has gotten thrown to, well, the police will deal with that when there's other people who would be far better equipped to deal with it and are trained for this. And instead, because there's not the mental health services, there's not the social services, it all comes to the police. And I'm not saying in any way that excuses, if they're not behaving in an appropriate way with it, but I think they would say too, like, yeah, that shouldn't be what the job of police is.
Yeah.
And if you took some money out of those budgets and, let's get some social workers, and get some mental health experts, that if you see somebody clearly mentally ill or having some problem, instead of calling the police, you call one of those people who's actually trained to deal with that and not escalate it. I also want to say, just since you mentioned the sort of small army thing, I want to give a shout out and a recommendation. I should have looked ahead of time and seen where this was going to be available, but I didn't know we were going to be talking about this topic. A friend of mine, Brad Barber, who's a professor at Brigham Young, made a documentary called Peace Officer that's fantastic about the militarization of the police, and I would highly recommend that. I had a chance to go see it in the theater when it was on its theatrical run. It was great. But really, and one of the interesting things is it's more or less done. He's not a police officer, but the main character he's following is, and this guy looking at kind of what happened to the job that he thought he was doing as a police officer, and like, now why do we have giant military vehicles and assault weapons, and we're becoming an army? And it talks about, the way the government sort of incentivizes them to buy these things. Anyway, fantastic documentary to check out. And the other thing, since...
Sorry, just along that point, I'll drop a link to that one in the notes, and I'll flat out tell you, they had a former police officer that it said, our training is literally, the police officers are being trained that it's us versus them. That like any encounter with a civilian, they could be armed and they could kill us. And so there's this hostile, they basically almost act like they're not citizens of the places that they are, and they treat us like the enemy, which is what has led to obviously so much strife in this country. And it's not just people of color, although of course that's by far the most, and that's just a racist institutional thinking that they're going to be the most threatening, but like they're taught that all of us, that any traffic stop could potentially be someone's going to pull a gun out and shoot them, and they're trained to. And the other thing is the point that they make too, that's a great point, is like, even if they're not armed, you're bringing a gun into this interaction. So then they're trained to like
it just got escalated anyway.
Right, exactly. And they're trained to not get their gun taken from them. There are so many sweeping institutional things that need to happen to this country to fix the actual problems that I sadly don't think in my lifetime ever will get fixed, but it would be nice if we'd at least start taking steps in the right direction.
Well, and if people, I think, started understanding some of these things, and I think, educate yourself if you agree or disagree with the perspective we're raising, like go find out the information instead of just going to your reflex, like, here's what I think about this. I always think the more you know about something, at least you start to get a sense of what the issues are. And as Mike said, if you're going to vote, like, hey, how do I feel about these issues? And maybe this is because I'm an academic. I think this is because the real world is messy. Most things, if somebody can fit it on a bumper sticker, it's probably not the right answer. And I don't mean that, like, you'll see that on every side of an issue. Like, most issues have some nuance, have some detail to them. And a lot of people, frankly, don't want to get into that. And they want the, give me the message I can say in 5 words and I can understand without thinking, and be better than that.
Yeah. And for God's sake, do not listen to my opinion. I'm a co-host of a podcast about a 60-year-old television show. So do not, I guess that's not what we're about, but yeah, go do independent reading and try and read the expert writings. Don't read MSNBC or CNN or Fox News. I mean, you feel free to do that as well, but don't just rely on that, because they have agendas too.
So I did just look up Peace Officer on Just Watch, and it's available if you subscribe to Hoopla or Canopy for free, or you can rent or buy it at Apple TV or Amazon or Vudu, Google Play, YouTube. Perfect. It's on all of those. And just here's their little synopsis from it, because I was like, I hope I remember the details of this right. Peace Officer's a documentary about the increasingly militarized state of American police, as told through the story of Dub Lawrence, a former sheriff who established his rural state's first SWAT team, only to see that same unit kill his son-in-law in a controversial standoff 30 years later. So that's fantastic. And then I know we're just recommending things because we were recommending anything you should be doing instead of watching Mr. Bevis. But going back to the car thing, I think I've mentioned this on this podcast before. If I haven't, go read the book Traffic. It's fantastic. Still one of my favorites of all time. It's nonfiction about traffic and cars and all those sorts of things.
So I have one other sort of referential thing that I only thought of maybe was, I wonder if they put this in this movie because of this episode. When he slides down the banister and goes all the way out the door and like rolls down the stairs, did you think at all of Kevin McAllister at Home Alone tobogganing down his stairs right out the door, like out? That was the only other reference that I wanted to make of this episode. So I thought
Home Alone holds up.
Home Alone is great. Home Alone is great. So, but that was the only other reference that I wanted to drop into this episode. And I don't think that there was a whole lot of other. Oh, I guess I will say this is another episode to me that did not, from the first moment, it felt like a comedy and did not feel like a Twilight Zone episode. And it was kind of a comedy. And so in the back of my mind, I was thinking of that. And then I was also thinking by the end of it, I was like, this almost seemed just like an exercise in effects, like in special effects or practical effects. The car flipping over, it just seemed like they're like, hey, let's throw a bunch. It was like a James Cameron movie with explosions.
Production wise, let's throw that out again, because that was another big like stunt. Like there were a lot of extras. They had all these cars going by on the street, and his car like flipped over on its, like, I will say this was probably not the place they should have put their resources in the Twilight Zone. They should have put it towards some other episodes, because there's been
Purple
other
Testament
good episodes where we're like, oh man, it would have been nice if they had the budget to do this. They saved all their money for this episode, but they did a lot of production on this. I'll go back to what I said earlier. If you don't have the story right in the first place, all the production in the world isn't going to save it. But I did appreciate Yeah, the stunt with the car. So we don't actually see the car flip over, but we see it sort of drive off and then hear some noise and come back, and the car's like flipped on its side, and there's people around it and cars driving by. It was a thing.
Yeah, it just seemed like they just threw a bunch of stuff like that into it. Again, like a James Cameron movie where it's just a bunch of dumb set pieces that are stupid.
You don't like James Cameron either?
No, we've discussed this. I know he's your hero, but I think he's terrible.
He is not my hero. I think what I've said is James Cameron is super manipulative, and you watch his movies and you feel yourself being manipulated. It's not subtle, but his particular manipulations work for me. It's one of it's like as somebody's hoodwinking me and I see exactly how they're doing it, I don't care because I'm so exactly ready to be hoodwinked at that point.
And I have to completely amend that because I definitely meant Michael Bay. I did not mean James Cameron. I do like James Cameron. Terminator,
Michael Bay is
Titanic.
also not my hero.
No.
James Cameron is much better than Michael Bay.
Yes,
I'm glad we have clarified that for those who were confused.
I apologize if you're listening, James Cameron. I do appreciate you, and I grew up on a lot of your movies.
James Cameron, if you're listening, Mike thinks you are Michael Bay. He does not understand there are two distinct people there.
Okay.
You mentioned Home Alone. Can I throw out one random Home Alone anecdote?
Sure.
I was in even if you said no, I was going to do it anyway. I was at a trivia contest thing, and there's a question that I think nobody ended up getting right. And it was like, in this movie, character travels and lists like all these different cities and places and stuff. And they're like, name the movie. And no one could come up with it. And it was Home Alone. And it was all the places the mom goes. Because they like start in Chicago. And then she goes over to Paris.
Wisconsin.
But then can't get, and she's like all over the U.S. But everyone was trying to think of like a movie about somebody traveling. Yeah. And you're like, no, it's this secondary character.
I would have picked a different John Candy. I would have picked Planes, Trains, and Automobiles before I would have thought of Home Alone. A different John Candy.
I think that's what
movie.
somebody guessed, except it said, well, John Candy's not in Home Alone. You're thinking,
he is. He was with the Kankakee Kickers. Doesn't he give her a bus ride?
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Good call.
Thank you.
They don't, in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, they don't go to Paris. I think that was the one that threw everybody. It's like at some point they're in Europe. Anyway, that was a good, not at all obscure trivia in the sense of like when they said Home Alone, everyone was like, oh, like it wasn't like some weird movie nobody had heard of.
Right. Interesting.
Anyhow, all right, let's wrap up on Mr. Bevis. I know we haven't talked about it much, but there is not much to talk about.
No.
Can I raise a plot hole issue? So the theme of this is stupid. It's a Wonderful Life, except
sort of reverse. It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of all this like, yeah,
he doesn't like the better life or whatever, but I was going to say that
the outcome is the same. Like he sees how it would be if things were different. In this case, if he was different instead of dying, doesn't like it, and that gives him wanting to go back to the way things were. So yeah, it's the end result is the same. Anyway, that was all dumb, and we've seen it better done elsewhere. And I don't even like It's a Wonderful Life, and I would watch that several more times before I'd watch this again. When they're leaving the bar, which by the way, it takes a really long time to get to this. Like we were 15 minutes into a 25-minute episode before the guardian angel even like explains what's going to happen. He says, if you want the day to end differently, you'll have to be a little bit different yourself, Mr. Bevis. So let's go. There isn't much time. And I was like, okay, I know this is nitpicky on an episode that had all sorts of problems with just being boring, but how is there not time? You're a guardian angel who has already said you can just magically send him back to the beginning of the day and be different. Also, you just spent all this time in the bar, like walking him through all of his ancestors that you had also worked with. How is there not time? He's like, but we got to get going right now. It reminded me of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which I like a lot. That's I think a really good movie and actually a really interesting time travel movie. But there's this device in it that never really rang true of, Rufus, George Carlin tells them, but this clock in San Dimas is still ticking and you have to be back on time to do your presentation. And you're like, why? They could, if they're running late, they could take the time machine back 20 minutes and be there, which in the sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, they in fact do exactly that because they're doing this battle of the bands and they get to perform and realize they don't know how to play their instruments. So like step into the phone booth, come back significantly older with kids now, but now have learned how to play their instruments and play it then. That always bugged me in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And it bugged me here because it feels like just the writer trying to give something, some sort of ticking clock that is not needed.
I love Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey as well, but I am blown away that that's the one you chose instead of when Marty McFly is sitting in the DeLorean. He's like, if only there was time. He's like, wait a minute. I got all the time in the world. I got a time machine. And he just goes back. It always bothered me that Marty McFly only gave himself 20 minutes to stop Doc getting shot, which of course we find out that he does anyhow. Spoilers for a 1985 movie. But I'm like, I would have gone back like a couple hours because you knew that DeLorean was a piece of shit. I would have taken that. And plus, I wouldn't want to cut it that close. I would have wanted to been like, let's get the hell out of here well in advance. Let's get you on a plane to somewhere else away from the Libyans. But
absolutely with you on that and on Marty making a bad decision there. But he realizes, whereas Bill and Ted and this don't, that like he has a time machine. He
exactly.
Can
he
go back
it
to
himself.
wherever he wants. So he understands the actual mechanics of it and then makes a bad choice about not giving himself enough time. And it was like a throwaway line, but I'm like, there isn't much time. And I was like, wait, what the hell is going on? That doesn't make any sense with what you just said. And I was like, this is literally the writer like, well, we need some way to end this scene. Like, all right, he could have just been like, let's get going. And I don't know.
Now that we're talking about Back to the Future, or I'm thinking about Back to the Future, I think actually that was what happened at the end of the first movie was the best possible outcome. Because if the Libyans hadn't found Doc or hadn't like thought that they killed him, they would have probably been chasing him for the rest of their days. And also, weren't the Libyans still just crashed in the parking lot when Doc's like trying to get Marty back up, if I recall correctly? Or Marty's getting Doc back up.
They crashed. Don't they like blow up because the guy has like a rocket launcher or something?
I don't think.
No, they're just crashed.
I think they only crashed in like a newspaper stand. So certainly they're still alive, sitting in that car 100 yards away from Doc and Marty.
Maybe they should have dealt with those then. Yeah. It is. You're right, and I think that's also maybe. I hate to say it about Back to the Future, but it doesn't really get into the mechanics of how the time travel is working or what the rules and stuff are about like. What had he gone back earlier and gotten Doc away before the Libyans show up, then he would not have traveled in time, and how would that have changed the loops and stuff like that? And they just sort of neatly sidestep all this. There was a little, I always love time travel-y things, and so I'm always attuned for looking for those. There was an interesting little detail in this of when Bevis gets his sort of normal life back, he's his normal self again, and goes into the office at the end, and the scene plays out exactly the same way. And I thought it did raise this more interesting than the episode question of maybe this is always the way it had played out. Maybe even when we saw him in the beginning, he had already seen like what was going to happen, the alternate reality. Like this was every time he walks in and gets fired, he already knew he was going to get fired. I don't know. I thought it was interesting because the scene plays out the same way. I gave that more thought than they did, I'm sure.
Okay, let's wrap this up. The closing narration. Mr. James B.W. Bevis, who believes in a magic all his own, the magic of a child's smile, the magic of liking and being liked, the strange and wondrous mysticism that is the simple act of living. Mr. James B.W. Bevis, species of 20th century male, who has his own private and special Twilight Zone.
I kind of like that very end beat, like this, the idea of the guy who's sort of going to the beat of his own drummer, like he gets his own different Twilight Zone too. I kind of like that. I don't know.
Otherwise, a little bit of a hokey closing narration.
Well, it was a hokey episode.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Okay, let's rank this thing.
Sweat. I honestly wasn't paying attention. I was so bored of the episode. I don't remember anyone being
Me neither.
sweaty.
I gave it a 1. Yeah. Okay. I don't remember anything either. Rating
1.
So
I could be talked up to a 1.5.
Yeah, no, I would definitely give it a 1. But the only reason I would say a 1.5 is because I put this on par with A Passage for Trumpet and not on par with The Chaser, which was a Passage for Trumpet was a 1.5. The Chaser was a 1. The Boxer was 1.5. Yeah, Big Tall Wish was a 1.5. I don't think this was as bad as The Fever, and at least they did some special effects.
They did. I think and this might be one, and I know I'm sort of arguing against myself here. In some other episodes where I thought there were like major production issues, I've sort of lowered half a star because of that. I actually thought, well, I didn't like how it was shot, but I like the production design. I like the effects. I like that it was expansive visually. And there was, the neat little sound design thing with all the people typing and stuff. And so maybe I'll bump it up a half for that. So like I said, I'd be fine with a 1.5. I will say in comparison to, what were other 1.5s recently? A Passage for Trumpet and Big Tall Wish. Is that right?
Yes.
Both of those had more compelling characters. And I think I said in both of those,
Agreed.
I would like to watch a drama about these. I don't think this actor was interesting or compelling, and the character he was playing was not interesting or compelling. Like, he was a collection of weird interests with sort of nothing underlying them. And unlike A Big Tall Wish or A Passage for Trumpet, I don't want to see a longer drama about this guy. I was uninterested in him the whole time. And the Guardian Angel was not as like charming or interesting as some of the secondary characters in these other ones. So
Orson Bean, the main actor, though, was weirdly prolific, and he just died in February of this year at 91. He was in a lot of stuff. He was in Being John Malkovich, Inner Space, Anatomy of a Murder. He's been in a lot. Modern Family, he was in an episode.
Like, I didn't think it was like terrible. He just like, he didn't have like a charisma that sort of carried the screen the same way. So I guess it falls below those episodes in those ways to me. However, I think all the production stuff was bigger and better than those, so I'm fine with a 1.5 on it, but I definitely don't want to watch this again.
No, me neither. I just also don't want to say that it's as bad as The Chaser and The Fever, because those were irredeemably bad. Yeah.
Those were bad on every level: story, acting, production, all of it.
100%.
Other than a demon. I kind of wished his guardian angel was going to be a demon.
That would have been good.
Did you have like some hope it was going to go that way? Also, did you notice, like, one of the things I think is interesting in A Passage for Trumpet and It's a Wonderful Life, because I'm going to group these three together because they're all the same story, is in those other two examples, the person very clearly, like, makes a choice. They're going to commit suicide. And I know in this case, he is not about to commit suicide, but he doesn't even make a choice to be like, man, I wish my life could be better or different. The guardian angel sort of shows up and is like, hey, I'm going to make things different and things will be better for you. And our main character never even says like, okay, that's good, or I don't want that. Like, he's just like along for the ride and doesn't seem to have any choice in it until the end. He's like, nah, can I just go back to how it was? And then I was like, okay. Like, there's no agency.
Yeah.
Whereas at least Joey Crown and whatever the guy's name is in It's a Wonderful Life, like, they're about to take an action and somebody's like, okay, let me show you the ramifications of this. Well, in A Wonderful Life it is. In the other one, it's like, we're not going to see anything. We're just going to kill 10 minutes of him babbling to himself, and then Gabriel will show up. So. Man, Mike, this season is not ending well.
No,
we've had a
some
rough
stinkers, and we're already fearing another stinker in one of the last 3 episodes. Or we're already knowing that we're going to get another stinker, because I've heard the same thing about the Mighty Casey.
I really hope that at least one of these last 3 is good, because I think we should say, and I know we're going to have, looking ahead to after the season, we're going to do one episode of sort of like a wrap up of season 1 and what we thought of the Twilight Zone overall. There have been some really interesting ones. There have been some compelling ideas. There have been some really good, memorable stories and stuff. And it just feels like they're running on fumes here. Like they're out of it. And I mean, we've seen like 3 episodes in the last 4 that are
It's a Wonderful
very
Life.
similar.
Yeah. And all of this sort of nostalgic sort of theme to all of them.
He's thinking back to the earlier days of the show when it was better.
Yeah. Mark, you ready to guess next week's episode, The After Hours?
Okay, so, well, I got my head in the 20s at this point, so I'm going to say it's some sort of after hours, like speakeasy club, and it's hosted by a devil who makes deals with people.
Oh, cool. And there's a monkey's paw.
And they all have a monkey's paw. By the way, do you watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all? I know you're not a huge Marvel person.
No.
It's fine. It's been very hit or miss. It's all over the place in terms of storylines and stuff over its run. This season has been pretty fascinating. They're doing a sort of time travel thing, and the time travel isn't really the point. The point kind of feels like the creators just wanted to set episodes in different times so they could do different wardrobe and have people reacting. But it's been kind of fun. Like every episode is, they've jumped into a different time and they do the title sequences differently. They did one set in the 80s where they did all the titles and the intros of the actors and stuff. They did like a cheesy 80s show where it's like the shot of them, their name, they like turn and smile at the camera and stuff. That's been very fun. And they had one set back in the 20s, but then one of the kind of ongoing gags through the season was there was this speakeasy that has remained like also a SHIELD, undercover hideout for decades since then. And so they keep going back to it in future years. Yeah, I'm not necessarily recommending the show. I'm kind of just...
But versus Mr. Bevis, do you recommend Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
I would recommend you sit down and watch all of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and like spend several days doing it. If the other choice is watch Mr. Bevis once, because it's just not worth it. No, it's not a bad show, but I'm watching it more because I'm kind of like a Marvel completist and I'm invested in those characters and I know it's ending soon. So like, okay, I'm willing to see how it wraps up at this point.
You seem to watch, for someone who complains about how little time you have to watch media, you seem to watch a lot of things that you're not super into watching, like Blacklist, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No, that's totally fair. And I'll give two semi excuses, but you're right. Like, look, I could make better choices with what I'm doing with my time. Part of it is, we've talked about like, there's like classic things or things you are really good that you really want to, like we're in the middle of Ozark right now, which I'm quite enjoying. I really like to watch it. The problem is by the time we get through the day with the kids being home and the working from home and the pandemic and everything, by the time the kids get to bed, it's sometimes like 9:30. And I'm just wiped and like I don't have the mental capacity for something that is going to be good that I really want to like sit and enjoy and like soak in. And so some of these things that are honestly just like easier, like I don't have to think much about them, but they're still entertaining and new. Like I'd rather watch a new Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Blacklist than like, just rewatch something that I've seen a gajillion times. Like I'd rather see something new, and I wouldn't watch something I thought was actually bad, but definitely I know there's better stuff, but most of the better stuff I would need to have my wits more about investment. Me for.
Yeah, Ozark is not a show that I would start watching at 9:30 at night because that like kind of amps you up a little bit. I think it's not really preparing you for sleep.
The other one I'm still getting through is Mr. Robot, which I'm really enjoying, but that one I kind of got to pick like what night I'm going to do it and kind of know like, okay, I'm going to stay up and be like amped up from it, and then I'm going to be tired in the morning. So that's part of it. Part of it is I am a completist, so it's very hard to get me off a show. Like I stay with a lot of shows longer than I should if I've watched them from the beginning. But the other thing is this ends up not taking up a ton of time. I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., they're doing like 11 episode seasons, and I watch them without the commercials. So, that's like, 10 hours of content or something in the entire year. And I'm actually kind of appreciating that some of these shows have short seasons now. Because
I love short seasons.
Get through.
Unlike The Twilight Zone.
Oh man, add 36 episodes.
Add Longmire to your list then, because it seemed that random episode in the middle at the end of season 2 seemed pretty good. So I think I might start watching it. I like the main character. I don't know who that actor is, but he has a great Wyoming sheriff voice. Okay. Right. Thank you all for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. Next week's episode is episode 34 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled The After Hours. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe. You can also find us at dejareviewed.com, where you can see all of our social media. You can leave us a voicemail. You can tweet at us. You can do a text. You can find our Facebook page. Do whatever you want on all those places. We hope that you tune in next week. Deja Reviewed.